Hello folks, here we are in the Conservatory of Doom, as I like to call it. Not because there's doom here, but I like doom bars. And this is where I eat them. Nah, it's not really. This area over here is where we do the casts, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm just setting up for this week's cast. Got a bit of a surprise in for you blokes, so stay tuned. And we're going to be casting sometime on Friday, but we don't know what time yet, so keep them peeled. Right, this week's Homebrew Wednesday video, folks, it's a little bit of a tweak to an Australian Pale Ale, a Cooper's kit, and we're going to be adding some hops. And even though I don't like an awful amount of hops, I think this one will turn out alright. So hopefully you'll enjoy my little experiment. It's not me making this up from scratch, it's from a Cooper's kit recipe. So if you go onto Cooper's Australian website, again, didn't even bother with the accent there, if you go onto their website you will see they've got loads and loads of recipes that you can you know, sort of tweak existing kits for, and this is one of them. It's the Ashes Ale. So we've got all sorts of wonderful things going into that. You'll see in a minute how I've done it, and I'll meet you at the end. So hope you enjoy it. See you in a bit.
Hey guys, here we have the contents of our Ashes Ale that we're going to be making this week. There's a Cooper's Australian Pale Ale, mate. That wasn't even an attempt at an Australian accent, was it? Instead of the Cooper's yeast, I'm going to be using the S04 because we're going to be essentially doing an English ale. There's some light dry malt, 2 lots, so and each of those is 500 grams, so there's a kilo of that. We've got some crystal malt, that's already been crushed, so we don't have to worry about arsing about with that. We've got some East Kent Goldings pellets, and we've got some Bramling cross. So all of these will be going into our lovely ale. So here we are, 24 hours before we're going to start our brew, and all I've done here is I've put all of the crushed grain into, you know, one of these bags, a muslin bag, and steeped it in 2 litres of cold water in a pot. What we're going to do, folks, is I'm going to reach over here, whee, put the lid on, and we're going to put that in the fridge and just leave it for 24 hours, and then we'll come back to it. Right folks, it's day 2 in the Big Brother house, and this, as you can see, is currently being sanitised. This is what we're going to do our brewing. While that's being sanitised, we'll go and get the pot out of the fridge and we'll move on from there. So as you can see folks, all I'm doing here is letting the grain bag drain into the already infused water. I'm going to get as much out of that as we can. So I'll give that a good squeeze in a second to get out the last remains of the water, and then what we need to do is add in 250 grams of light malt extract. So let's get on with that then. So here's our light malt extract. It's just over 250. Don't worry about that too much because some will stick to the bowl anyway as you pour it in. Chuck that in there, and then what we need to do is to bring it to the boil. So I'm going to switch this on and bring it to the boil, and then once it's boiling folks, what we're going to do then is we're going to add 25 grams of East Kent Golding hops and boil that for 15 minutes. Okay guys, so I've given this a good stir, and when you first put your malt in you will see that it's very clumpy, but once the water heats up, if you give it a good old stir, the clumps will go and you'll be left with a sort of smooth liquid, which smells rather pleasant actually. Very malty and pleasant and lovely.
There it goes. Now I'm just waiting for it to bubble up a little bit, and then I'm going to chuck in my 25 grams of East Kent Goldings hops, and they will go in to the bubbling pan, and we'll boil them for 15 minutes because that's the way we like to roll, and that's what it says on the recipe, folks. So we're going to follow the recipe to the T, except we're going to be using Safale US04 yeast rather than the yeast that comes with the Australian Pale Ale kit. Let's go back to the pan. As you can hear, it's heating up a little bit, but it's not quite boiled yet. And while I think of it, folks, let's go back to our sanitised fermenting vessel here. We want to make sure, obviously, that we've got a paddle in there to mix everything up. And also what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this to get the water out into a big pot on the floor there, and then I'll give it a big rinse before we put anything related to our brew in there, because we want to make sure it's all sanitised and clean. Right folks, here we are, it's bubbling up now. So what I'm going to do is going to chuck in these hops, put them hops in, and we'll time it 15 minutes. I'll just chuck in a couple of extra little bits in there. Give it a good old stir, yeah, just to make sure that we get all the goodness out. We want to make sure that we don't have little bits of hops floating around. We want to make sure basically that we get as much goodness out of all of these ingredients as we can, which means we need to give it a good old stir. So I'm going to leave that now to bubble over for 15 minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll come back and we're going to add 25 grams of Bramling cross hops, and we're going to let that steep for 15 minutes. Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the next step. That's been boiling for 15 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these and we're going to chuck them in here. What are they, Roy, you ask? Well, I told you earlier, if you remember. They're 25 grams of Bramling cross hops. And all we're going to do is we're just going to let that steep in there for 30 minutes. That's all we're going to do. Nothing too exciting. But obviously we want to make sure that we give it a good old stir before we just leave it, basically. 30 minutes is all we're going to give it. Now I said in the previous bit, I think I said 15 minutes, but I was talking about the hops that were already boiling. I got myself mixed up, didn't I? So these are going to be left for 30 minutes now. So come back in 30 minutes, folks. Okay guys, so while the hops are steeping for 30 minutes, I've emptied this fermenting vessel, cleaned it with cold water, covered it up for a bit, keep any nasties out. And with some of the water that I strained out, down here I've got my little bag, straining bag, that I'm going to be using to strain the hops into the brew, and a tin opener because I forgot to put those two into the fermenting vessel. So always make sure, I've said this before, that you've got a little pot with some sanitising liquid in there, so that if you forget anything you can just chuck it into the pot. Okay guys, so we're coming to the end where the hops are steeping at the end of the 30 minutes, and in the meantime I've stuck in here malt and maltodextrin. So all of the malt that's left, I think that's 750 grams and 250 grams of maltodextrin. Just over here on the stove, I'm just boiling up some hot water, and then I'm going to chuck that into the fermenting vessel, give it all a good old stir up, make sure I can you know, get rid of the clumps and stuff before I sieve the hops and the put the Australian Pale Ale kit in there. As you can see, folks, what I've done is we've got this sort of straining bag here over the top of the fermenting vessel, and all I've done is I've poured all the hoppy stuff and the grain stuff into this bag, and it's just going to strain in there. I'll give it a little bit of a squeeze. By the way, this bag has been sanitised as well, because obviously anything that comes in contact with the beer, we need to make sure it's sanitised. So this needs to have a good old squeeze to make sure I get as much out of that as I can. Then I'll give it a little stir and we'll put in the pale ale kit. And here we are, folks, just pouring in the dregs of the Cooper's Lager kit. Most of it's in there now. I'm just going to give the kit a little wash through with some hot water, just to make sure I get as much out as I can, and then all we'll do is we'll fill up the fermenting vessel with water. Easy, innit? So here we are then, folks. It's at 21 litres, there or thereabouts. And although the temperature is probably around about 24 to 25 degrees, it's probably a good idea to get the yeast in there as quickly as we can. So I'm just going to chuck that on now. Now, in normal circumstances, I would rehydrate the yeast. Whoops, I chucked a bit. I would rehydrate the yeast. But in this instance, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to chuck it on because I'm sure it'll be fine. So there it is, folks, in our temperature controlled beer fridge. It's got a blowout tube in there as well. You know I like to use those just in case we get any serious foamage. That will stay in there at a temperature somewhere between 19 and 20 degrees. And then you might think we're all done, but no, we're not, because in 3 days time I'm going to come back and I'm going to put in another 25 grams of hops because we haven't got enough in there. Woohoo! Right, so it's day 3 now. The brew has been fermenting for 3 days, obviously, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put in 25 grams of the Bramling Cross hops, and we're just going to put that, as you can see, in this mesh bag. Now this mesh bag has been sanitized, it's been cleaned, and we're just going to wrap this up and chuck it into the fermenting vessel, leave it in there for the length of the fermentation for the rest of the week or so, probably 7 to 10 days, something like that. And that's it, folks. So hope you've found this useful. I'm just going to go and wrap this up and chuck it in the fermenting vessel, and it's job done.
Hello, here we are, folks, at the end of the video. Thank God for that, I hear you say. Well, you know, all good things come to an end, and all good ends come to a thing, or something like that. Thank you for watching this week's Homebrew Wednesday video, and thank you for tuning in to last week's cast that we did in Harry's absence on Friday evening. I had a blast, I got very drunk and I got very silly, and I knew things were getting a little bit silly towards the end when I played the same song I was told about 3 or 4 times in a row. Sorry about that, folks. But, you know, that's what the homebrew does to you. You forget things. I didn't realise I was playing the same tune over and over again. But never mind. There's always next time, isn't there? Thanks for joining in on that. I had a blast. There were, at one point, I think I counted 20 to 25 people on. So it was good. It was a good cast. And no doubt some of you are Harry viewers. So I think Harry will be back at his normal time this week. So watch out for Harry. Friday nights at 8 PM I think he goes out. I will be going out, as I said earlier in this video, sometime on Friday, probably leading up to Harry at 8 PM, but we'll see how it goes. We've got some surprises in store. So watch out for that one, folks. And the cat's running around the conservatory having a bit of a funny half hour, so excuse the noise. I'm going to sign off now. Again, thanks for watching. Hope you found it useful. If so, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, wherever the button is. I can't remember where the bloody thing is. It's down there somewhere, I think, isn't it? Subscribe, share, and I'll see you on the next one. If not, on this week's cast. See you, folks. Ta-da.